Most sculptures are made to be seen. They are placed in churches, in piazzas, above altars. They are commissioned by popes and cardinals and princes who want the world to know their names. They are designed to be looked at by strangers. Bernini made hundreds of sculptures like that. And then, in 1646, at the lowest point of his life, he made one that was not. He kept it in his house. He never sold it. He never exhibited it. He left instructions in his will that it should never leave his family. For 22 years, no one outside his home knew it existed. This is truth unveiled by time. And the first question it asks is not about the marble. It is about why a man who spent his entire life making things for others made this one only for himself. The sculpture is 277 centimeters tall. It is white Carrara marble. It stands today as the Galleria Borghese in Rome. A young woman reclines on a boulder. She is partially draped, her bare chest and stomach exposed, her face turned upward. In her right hand she holds a representation of the sun. Her left leg rests on the earth. Her expression is not distress. It is not anger. It is something closer to relief. The drapery behind her does not look carved. It looks interrupted, fabric caught mid-movement, as though the stone solidified around something that had not yet stopped. Her skin does not look like marble. It looks like something that would be warm to the touch. But look at what is missing. Bernini intended a second figure. Time above her, lifting the veil. Time was never carved. The unveiling is happening. The one doing it is not there. Start with the skin. Because that is where the argument begins. Bernini's biographer Filippo Baldinucci, writing in the 17th century, described the sculpture this way. His chisel was applied in such a way that one could believe it had been cutting wax instead of marble. Not stone painted to look like flesh. Not stone polished until it resembled skin. Stone that reads to the eye as a different material entirely. The cold rigidity of Carrara marble producing the optical effect of something that yields. Now, consider what Bernini chose not to carve. The figure of time, the hand pulling the veil, the presence making sense of the whole composition, was planned from the beginning. Bernini made drawings. He had the concept. He worked on the sculpture for 6 years, and he never carved time. What exists is a woman mid-unveiling, caught in a moment that has no agent. The veil is being lifted. There is no one lifting it. Whether that absence is a failure or a decision is the first thing this sculpture refuses to answer. The earliest documented reference to the sculpture appears in a letter from Paolo Giordano, the second Orsini, Duke of Bracciano, to Cardinal Mazarin, dated July 6, 1647. By that point, Bernini had already been working on it for approximately 6 months. His son Domenico, in his biography of his father, recorded Bernini's own explanation for why he made it. After the humiliation of the bell towers, Domenico writes, Bernini was persuaded that just as the false can take vigor from haste, so the truth of his good faith would rise again more beautiful with dwelling and with time. He was not making a sculpture. He was writing a sentence in marble, and he was the only one who was supposed to read it. To understand what Bernini was doing, you have to understand what had just happened to him. For 2 decades, Bernini had been the undisputed center of Roman art. His patron, Pope Urban VIII, had protected him, promoted him, given him every major commission in the city. When Urban died in 1644, that protection ended. The new Pope, Innocent X, had no interest in Bernini. Worse, Bernini's arch-rival, Francesco Borromini, was now the papal favorite. And on February 23, 1646, Innocent issued a decree ordering the demolition of the bell tower Bernini had designed for the facade of St. Peter's Basilica. The foundations had developed problems. Bernini was blamed. He was fined. He was removed from his position as lead architect of the most important building project in Rome. Later scholarship, including the research of historian Sarah McPhee, would document that the structural problems were not entirely Bernini's fault. The towers had been repeatedly enlarged under papal pressure, and a political dispute may have influenced the timing of the decree. But in 1646, none of that mattered. What mattered was that the man who had defined Roman art for 20 years was publicly finished. He was 47 years old, and he went home and started carving. In 1665, 19 years after he began the sculpture, Bernini mentioned in passing that he still intended to add the figure of time. He never did. What he did instead was write the sculpture into his will. The passage is specific, and it is worth reading exactly as he wrote it. "Because of my works, not without reason, I have retained near me the statue of truth discovered by time. I want it to remain in the house of the firstborn, in order to have always and in perpetuity a memory, in my descendants, of my person. Looking at it, all my descendants will be able to remember that the most beautiful virtue in the world consists in truth. For in the end, this is discerned by time." He kept it for his entire adult life. He died in 1680. The sculpture stayed as a Bernini family home until 1924, 278 years after he made it. It was purchased by the Italian state in 1957 and placed permanently in the Galleria Borghese. The most personal object Bernini ever made spent nearly 3 centuries where he put it. Here is where the sculpture splits into 2 completely different objects, depending on how you read it. The first reading is personal. Bernini made this for himself, as therapy, as private defiance. The message was never meant for anyone else. He needed to believe that time would vindicate him, that his enemies would be proven wrong, that the truth of his ability would eventually emerge. The sculpture was the physical form of that belief. He kept it private because it was private. When he wrote it into his will, he was passing on a private lesson to his children, not making a public statement. In this reading, the missing figure of time makes sense. Time was never the point. The point was truth, already unveiled, already free, already holding the sun. The vindication was not coming. It had already happened, in marble. But there is a second reading, and it changes everything. If Bernini intended from the beginning to keep this sculpture, then the missing figure of time was not a failure to complete the work. It was the work. An unveiled figure with no one unveiling her. Truth that emerges on its own, without an agent, without a hand pulling the veil, is a more radical statement than anything Innocent X's Rome would have tolerated in public. The sculpture that was too honest to exhibit became, by staying hidden, the most honest thing Bernini ever made. If you accept the first reading, you are looking at a man consoling himself. If you accept the second, you are looking at a man who knew exactly what he was doing. and knew that the only safe place for it was inside his own house. The sculpture stood in a private home for 278 years. No patron commissioned it, no church displayed it, no public ever saw it. Until Bernini had been dead for longer than most institutions survive, he wrote in his will that time discerns truth. He had 3 decades to add the figure of time, and never did. Whether that was unfinished business or a finished argument is something this sculpture has been refusing to answer since 1646. I would like to know what you think. Drop your reading in the comments. I read everyone.